everyone, and welcome to Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening. Michael Henry Dunn here, as usual, with my esteemed friend, Reverend Maia Chrystine Nartoomid. Hello, Maia.
Hello, Michael and everyone.
Yeah, all right. So today is a really fascinating subject. Of course, they almost always, not almost, but always, are
Oh,
always fascinating. Um, on a video which Maia has prepared called The Women of Seraphim, Seraphim being a very high vibrational city in the sacred hollow of the inner earth, which should probably be differentiated in people's minds from cities that are in caverns closer to the surface of the earth. The inner earth hollow is just on a different quantum level of trans-dimensional existence. Would that be a fair way of putting it, Maia?
yes, it's not too far removed from us, but there's a slight dimensional shift. It's kind of like Thoth equates it to water sparkling on the surface of, sunlight sparkling on the surface of water. It's just slightly removed. If you take the plunge, you can just very easily shift and you're in. It's not like it's hugely different dimension.
Right. So for the geologists in the audience, this is not a contradiction of the accepted conventional paradigm of the molten levels of and magma and the iron core of the planet, which affects the electromagnetism of the planet. That's all there, and yet this is experienced as a slight dimensional shift for the hollow. So we're not going to spend a lot of time describing it. We're going to share the video with you now. It's about 25 minutes and concerns what the life and purpose of particularly the women in this high vibrational city in the inner earth hollow called Seraphim. What is the history, how it came to be, how the different races that coexist harmoniously there came to emigrate from the surface of the earth over many thousands of years, the kind of work they're doing, how men and women are different. It's a fascinating subject. And so with that, we will share this with you. It'll begin in a few moments, and we will be right back to dive deep into this amazing story of the women of Seraphim. So please enjoy, and we'll be back with you shortly.
The topic with this video, the Women of Seraphim, is focusing on the women, the divine feminine, of the city of Seraphim and greater Seraphim around it, within the sacred hollow, the inner earth of the planet. But first, let us look at the inner earth, specifically the hollow of the planet, from the perspective of the Thoth Akasha. This is a topic that I have been working with since the mid-1970s. And during that time, I've been given a large amount of science, understanding of how this could be, how this could operate, and also of the people in general, but an overview of all of the inner earth civilizations. When I say all, not individually, but just an overview of it all. The main thing that I wish to share here as prefacing this particular topic is that the majority of the people in the inner earth are our genetic kindred very directly, because they have been brought into the inner earth from ancient civilizations of the past. They were not kidnapped. They were willingly escorted by our star kindred into the sacred hollow to protect a sort of like an ark of species, of human genetics, of all races, that could be kept, shall we say, pure from the contagion of the surface world. And some of these races are extinct now on the surface of the planet. I say races, also cultures. Basically, they call them cultures in the inner earth. And so that understanding is paramount in realizing that these are very human people. Now, some of them, well, most of them have been born there or came in at a later period than the original migrations that brought them into the interior. Now, for those of you who have studied my work, I want to explain something further. This is not about the migrations from the blue star. This was a direct migration to the surface of the earth from Rigel and other migrations later from other star systems that are related to our kindred, that are part of our kindred. This is not coming down through the lotus reality. That came first, at least the beginnings of that. And when it was seen that the lotus reality was going to be merging with the physical earth reality as we sort of understand it, then the great migrations began from the blue star and other systems directly to the surface of the planet. But some of these migrations went into the hollow even then at that time, some of them. So there's a large picture here to cover, and we're not going to cover it because I want to try to stay on this topic. But I just want to give you an idea of all of this so you can understand that the majority of the beings in the inner earth are not beings, they're people. They're human beings who were either born in the inner earth of generations that originally came from the surface of the planet, or because they lived so long, some of them were brought in directly, maybe 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years ago. They can live that long. And apparently, persons are still being brought in, but very little now because already the planet has sunk to a new low on the surface of the earth, although that is changing. It's coming upward again. And largely, the help that we're being given is not only from the star kindred, but from the beings, the people of the inner earth. Now, granted, the inner earth persons have more star genetics than we do. We all have some star genetics, but more than we do because they're kindred star beings. They have, certain zones where these beings dwell, the star kindred, and continue to help and guardian the people, the human people of the inner earth. And I use the word human loosely because the star kindred are also out of the Adam Kadmon template, but on a higher level of creation. So again, this is a complex study. But I wanted to simply give you some idea of it before we begin in understanding the women of the Seraphim. And so, also, in order to understand this topic, we need to look at the men as well. We're not sublimating them here. It just happens to be that this particular focus is on the females. So what about Seraphim itself? We're going to look at that and understand how unique this particular city and greater area is in regard to the rest of humanity within the inner earth, or at least the hollow of the earth. What you're going to hear now is a compilation of some things I've written, as well as what I'm now bringing forth. So we begin by saying, many years ago, when I was around 25 and very much involved with my ultra-terrestrial guardians who were preparing me for conscious contact with my illumined mentor, whom I would find out later was Thoth, well, this story begins. On several occasions, I would awake from sleep hearing a woman's voice call my name. Now, this was many years ago. I asked my guardians who this was, and they responded that she was me, in a concurrent embodiment within the inner earth domain. I thought they told me her name was Michaela, but only recently was corrected. It is Mikala. I was also recently reminded by Thoth that when I was 4 or 5, I named my doll Michaela. I really didn't go into learning more about this concurrent life those many years ago. So much was happening, so many transmissions and visitations. It was difficult for me to go deep with any one thing. Not long after that, I began my publication, The Source, which started with information concerning the science of the inner earth and its inhabitants and culture. The first several issues focused exclusively on this. I was having what I would call now remote viewing and a few astral trips, I believe, into the inner earth. Now, one morning in 2019, I awoke and heard in my mind Seraphim. I asked, "What is this?" and instantly received, "It is a sacred city within the inner earth realm." Then more and more poured in and continues to do so. Thoth calls it a new earth city within the inner earth. It connects through the Shambhala gate to the planetary frequency and dimension we are calling the new earth. Shambhala represents the conscious spiritual intelligence of souls incarnated within the earth, the races of the inner earth cultures. Esoterically, Shambhala is also considered to be the point in the body between the third eye and the crown, where inner vision and higher knowing come together to materialize as deep inner spiritual revelation. Shambhala is not a chakra unto itself, but a meridian node created by the combined forces of the crown and brow chakras. Within the sign of Taurus, the Shambhala meridian node in the body is activated through an infusion of higher consciousness radiating from the stellar origins of Orion, Ursa Major, and the Pleiades. The degree of activation is determined by the spiritual evolution of the particular individual. The star system of Sirius also contributes to this dynamic by releasing trapped energies within the magnetic field of the individual during the reign of Taurus each solar year. The Shambhala school, which is something you can Google, writes that the word Shambhala refers to the planetary crown chakra, the center where the will of God is known. My former husband, Simeon, received that the Shambhala gate was the portal in the membrane between this world universe and what Thoth calls the Akashic universe. Thoth concurs. According to my receipt from Thoth, the Akashic is the universe of non-duality, of completion, of perfection and light. In this regard, the Shambhala gate serves a similar purpose to the Numus Om, which is the first stage of the new Earth star, in its membrane function to the new Earth star. Thoth states that the Shambhala gate actually contains the entry point into the Numus Om. You could see this gate somewhat like a control panel. On the panel, there are various buttons, nodes that, if pressed or triggered, open specific frequency vectors. One of these vectors is the lotus stalk or streaming into Numus Om. Now, this term lotus and lotus stalk, the lotus reality is the first reality that connected to Earth from Rigel. And then beings came down from the lotus stalk and began to become more human, taking on more of the template of the Adam Kenmon, which initially was begun in the lotus, but then it continued more rapidly once people had, or souls had become people, had come down into the physical reality of Earth. So now they're talking about the lotus stem taking us back up again, but not into the lotus reality, but into the new Earth star. The connection nodes are the gateway stars of Orion, known as the Belt of Orion. There are 3 tower stations within the city of Seraphim, which connect to the 3 stars composing the Belt of Orion. They are enormous and are somewhat like the ones placed on our remaining moon, and I might add, on Mars. The inner Earth towers are not as massive, but still around a mile in height. Through this connection, the city of Seraphim creates an interface with the New Earth Register. Seraphim is also the seat of the Noblest Terra Nata, or NTN, a newly formed cooperative. The NTN is composed of both off-planet and inner-Earth kindred. The NTN purpose is to work with the ongoing installation and operation of the Pyramidus Radius Matrix, or the PRM. Now, these are terminologies I have videos on, so I'm not going to go into it here. So now we return to Mikala, myself within the inner earth. She dwells within the city of Seraphim and has been about the great work there before the I, writing this, was born. There are others of the Noblest Terra Nata there who are also at the same time on the surface earth. Such things are not as uncommon as one might suppose, to be in more than one place or dimension at a time. In fact, in the greater sense of soul ratio, we all are. In the more focused aspect, while it is not all, it is nevertheless not a small number who have specific relationships between their soul projections. In the last few years, I have had glimpses of Seraphim, but not knowing its name or where it was, simply feeling as if it were home to me. In a way, I feel I have been subconsciously attempting to recreate my Mikala aspect through my avatar in the virtual world of Second Life. Only recently, in 2021, did I come across in my files a faded typewritten transmission from Mikala to myself, which was received in 1979. Until I found it, I had not realized that I had ever received an actual transmission from her. I would like to read now from this transmission. And so this transmission of 6/25/79 begins. I am received. I am a projection of the Magnus soul which we share, yet I am an individual entity such as yourself, with a character and being of my own. But I am of your spiritual countenance and the wholeness of your higher self. We are one in the spirit of our common soul, yet separate in the lower mind and the elemental flesh. The transmission continues, but it is about other things, and I wish to try to get to the topic here of the Women of Seraphim, so I'm not going to go into it any further. Some of what I'm going to tell you here I have mentioned before in different videos and articles. I'm kind of bringing it all together and then giving new information. One of the things that's important to understand is about the heart poles. I have a series of videos on that again, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail. But I was told some years ago that females in the body have 3 heart poles, or you could call it a triangular heart pole with 3 points to it, whichever way you want to look at it. And males have 1 column, 1 heart pole. And there's a purpose in that. It's not that they're deficient. There is a reason why there's 3 and 1. It's a balanced, synergetic component. And because of our duality in the physical, it's necessary. So I'm not going to go further into that, but to say this, that because of this, it is difficult for women in the central hollow of the planet to conceive a male embryo. It's not difficult to give birth to a male child, but to conceive. Now, it still happens because there, according to Thoth, only 20% more women than men. So plenty of men are still being born in the inner earth, conceived and born, but it's still a little off balance because of that. This has to do with the magnetic properties of the inner earth. It's a large scientific topic, and I really don't even know anything about it right now, and I don't want to know. There's too much for me already to deal with. But that is what he tells me. So, finally, let us look at the women's roles in Seraphim. More women tend to be involved in nature and shamanic work, while men's roles are more geared to the star portals and maintaining the magnetic stability of the inner earth regions. This is not a clean division. Certainly men and women work in various ways, women with stellar frequencies and men with earth, nature, and healing frequencies. But generally, we're seeing that it is considered in the realm of the divine feminine, just as it is on the surface earth, to focus on nature, healing, energies of the earth, while the stellar focuses are more for the male energies. This is an energy division, but it's not a human division. So men who are connecting more and focusing more in nature realms, they're addressing their divine feminine. And vice versa. Women who are more stellar-oriented, cosmic-oriented, are addressing their more male energies. And it's the same thing in the inner earth, only it's really understood better and developed better. And also, there are those of both sexes who do work in both areas, just like it happens on the surface earth. However, in general, the males tend to be working with the advanced sciences of the ancient surface world and with the star kindred in the sacred hollow, who are the guardians and protectors of the inner earth civilizations. And the females dive deep into the healing of the planet through their connection to the heart of Gaia. It is the women who lead the perpetual chanters through the labyrinth. These chanters are composed equally of both men and women, numbering 66 in total. There is a cycling through the population of Seraphim, so that all citizens take turns within the Alukam, the chanting procession. Ceremonial prayers and dance are a large part of the culture of Seraphim. Both sexes dress beautifully for these occasions. Yet there is a depth within these rituals and ceremonies. It is a summoning, a focus, a creation of sacred geometry in the ethers that they perform. When they are not involved in sacred ceremony, they dress in simple, loose-fitting clothing, mostly in earth tones. Their everyday life is centered around growing of food, maintaining the technology based on intuitive circuitry, which our surface earth scientists call teslophoresis, and raising of the children. As previously stated, there are few children in the hollow of the earth, but the ones there are tenderly and wisely raised. Now this brings us to another topic, and that is mathematics. There are only so many men and a lot more women. They have a process of men being with women, more than one, for the purpose of procreation. It's not some kind of primal ceremony. It is a very elegantly designed situation that is approached lovingly and with great respect. I'm not going to go into it much more than that, but I think you get the picture. In the inner earth, in all the cultures really, but we're looking here at Seraphim, there's not this possessive thing, where I've got to find my other half. I'm not complete without it, and I must have a partner, and he's got to be faithful to me, and I'm faithful to them, and we have this family, and we raise these children together, and that's that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that in the inner earth, they have a more expansive picture of it. And so, yes, they can have lifelong partners, but they live a long time, remember. But they can also women can have children through the process of experience with a selected male for that purpose, and they can not necessarily have a male in the household, and yet the children are very much raised in a collective manner so that they have male influences in their lives that are very deep and heart-centered, as well as the actual birth father. Their birth control is not something that they do. in regard to, a remedy, a herbal thing, or anything like that. It's not contraceptions, nothing like that. But it is important that they have birth control because there's a limited space. And so this is something that seems to be occurring between the intelligence of Gaia and the individuals participating, shall we say. It's an energy thing. It's a way of experiencing co-creation. But there's a third element, and that is Gaia herself. Both men and women participate in working with surface Earth souls in programs for healing and teaching. These souls come into the inner domain astrally, or what Thoth calls in a state in between astral and remote viewing. One of these examples is the Aura Healing Center, which I was told about, I believe, around 1980. But there are other ways this occurs as well. In dream time, in experiences where you're not even aware that this is happening. All lineages are measured in Seraphim through the matriarchy, so last names would be of the mother. In some of the cultures within the sacred hollow, it is more patriarchal, but always there's a balance between the two. Since music is so prominent in Seraphim, tuning forks, bowls, and other vibrational sound instruments abound in every home and in most sacred spaces. An example of one of the women's temples is the Temple of the Pure Moon. The pure part of the name references the astral moon, which still contains the divine encodings of both of the two moons that once orbited the earth, before the destruction of one and the artificial tampering with the other by ET races who do not have the sacred evolution of Earth as part of their cosmic agenda. In the Temple of the Pure Moon, the priestesses move into the sphere of light, which they have energetically created through sonic frequency, which is the Pure Moon chamber. I cannot conclude this video without mentioning the Dakini. I have done 2 videos on them, so will not go into detail here, but the Thothic tells of the history of the true Dakini who came from the Pleiades into the sacred hollow of this planet. They have an island on the outer edge of Greater Seraphim. They often come to celebrate in Seraphim and sometimes travel to other territories of the inner earth.
All right, welcome back. So, Maia, this has so many levels and depths to it, and the way you open it with describing how it differentiates from the lotus reality, how the inner earth realm first began to be populated, and how it functioned as a haven during times of turmoil on the surface for various races and cultures at different times to be um, preserved and saved. You likened it kind of like to Noah's Ark, right? That, here comes the flood, and we can't allow these plants and animals to be lost, and so we must preserve them. And because of the dimensional shift, the energetics of the heart of Gaia that they live in the light of, they have lifetimes, many hundreds of years longer than we do on the surface. And, of particular interest, which I'd love for you to delve into, is what you bring forward about how masculine and feminine roles are understood on a higher level in this inner earth realm. There are still clear masculine dynamics, feminine dynamics, as how the masculine focus at the level of the sacred work they do is more on the stellar dynamics, whereas for women, the feminine focus is more on working with the energies of Gaia and the earth. And yet, of course, both, there are women who do the stellar work and men who do the Gaia earth work. So I'd love for you to just explore, if you would, for a minute with me, because up here on the surface, things are such a mess right now, particularly between men and women. And the seeming loss of the more clearly defined traditional gender roles, which is, good and healthy, that, particularly, of course, because of the abuses of the patriarchy over many centuries. And yet there is this higher dynamic, that there actually are, dynamics and focuses and energies that might be described as masculine, and others that are in the feminine principle. So are there things that we can understand and learn from how things unfold in the inner hollow of the earth between men and women, as you described, with the absence of a possessive nature to the understanding of marriage, and how children are conceived in a in a sacred manner that that is because of the numbers. It's more than one partner because of the small numbers of men. Are there lessons that we can learn here from how these things are understood in the inner earth realm?
Yes. First of all, this is not a treatise on saying that people shouldn't have lifelong partners, not by any means. And they have them in the inner earth as well. But even that is different from ours. The psychology, the spiritual connection, the way they view that lifelong partner, the relationship. Yes, they are faithful to it, but faithfulness in a situation within the inner earth is a different modality because of the nature of the situation and the nature of the environment and the nature of the inability for women to conceive as many males as would be needed, shall we say. So all these things are factors that are woven in. It's not to say, oh, we should all, just have a bunch of partners. First of all, we ain't ready for that. Like I said on the video, we're not even coping with lifelong partners, much less anything like that. But you see, looking at it from the perspective of how they deal with it is what we can learn. Not what they do, but how they express their ability to rise above the confining dimensions, not of propagation and sexuality, but the confining dimensions of mind and heart that cause us to focus and look at relationships, all kinds of relationships, far differently than they do. And that's what we can learn from them, not trying to emulate their inner earth, the way they have to do things physically, because we're in another situation that's not applicable to us. But understanding the dimensions and scope of the heart and how it references relationships and how it works with those relationships, so that we're not confining ourselves and saying, this has to be this way for us, or it has to be that way. I've met a person in my life and now we're going to be partners and this has to be a certain way. But at the same time, understanding the sacredness of a life partner and what that can mean to you. Are you ready for that? Is that something that compels you to a new level of spirituality? If it doesn't, don't go there. You know, you have to feel what you're doing and not try to feel it afterward. Do it and then feel it. It doesn't work that way. Not very successfully anyway. Yes, we can learn from things, but you know, developing the heart spirituality, developing the feel of kinship, developing the feel that we respect and love the genders we are having relationships with, even if it's same gender. There has to be that respect and love of all of it before you can respect and love the significant other in your life. You can't just single them out and say, well, I don't like these men and women over here, but I love this person. No, you've got to expand that field and feel it and connect, because we are communal beings. And so are they on the inner earth. So are they on the star kindred. We're communal beings. It's hardwired into our divine systemic template, Adam Kadmon in our case. And if we try to override that by our willfulness or our supercilious demands and you know, expressions, then we have defeated ourselves. Now, when I say we're communal beings, I'm not saying we all lockstep together. Of course not. That's not where we are. We're not a hive of bees. We're human beings. We have individual characters and experiences, and we need to be respected and loved for the individuals we are. But that said, there is a morphogenetic field that encompasses all of us through our genetic code. And that is one that brings us together in harmony. So why are we so disharmonious? Because we're not bathing ourselves, immersing ourselves in that field, that morphogenetic field. We're fighting it all the time. We've got the scissors out. We're trying to cut all the little cords. I'm an individual. Cut. I'm an individual. You know, it's like we don't understand what individuality really means. Individuality means accepting the beauty and the significance of who you are within the greater matrix, not trying to separate yourself from it or scorn somebody else that's in it because they're not looking or acting or being like you are. So I'm going on and on, but you get the picture. It's like we have to come out of that confining space. And those in the inner earth, you know, they are, you know, all of the beings in the hollow earth, they all have the attitude that they come together out of, well, you could call it from the Eastern tradition, dharma, and not karma. A long time ago, I said, so how come they have such great relationships in the inner earth? You know, male, female, and all of it, the families, who's incarnated into what families and all of this. And he said, because everything flows according to dharma and not to karma. Does that mean they have no challenges? Oh, they do, but their challenges aren't interrelational. They really don't have hardly any challenges between one another. Some of the tribes have a little bit, you know, but it's not anything like we think, you know, we have. It depends. They're different people in the inner earth, just like they're different people here, only, well, not just like, because they're more together, but, you know, there's some groups of people that are a little less together than others. But nevertheless, the most untogether group is still operating on that higher principle, you know. And like in Seraphim, I don't think you can find two people that had a didn't have a love and a respect for one another.
Yes, when you use the word dharma, of course, which I believe in Sanskrit essentially translates to truth or righteousness, that for these beings on the inner earth, I think about it, and they live many hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years, right?
Some
And
do,
yeah, and so there is an understanding that is just in the air they breathe, that they're not in the body to become rich or become famous or become, or get to the top of the heap. There is an awareness of the joyous purpose of life being fulfillment of your unique individuality through service to the greater good of all, while, of course, expressing your unique divine individuality. And then, of course, up here on the surface, there are millions, if not billions, who are just engaged in a struggle to get enough food to get through the day, keep a roof over your head. Maybe, my children will have a better life. Maybe my children will live, at all. And then, all right, in, more so-called first world nations, we're more concerned with, okay, we have a little bit more leeway to think about meaning, to think about service, to think about the divine, to think about the nature of the soul. But even so, when you look at how we approach these questions of the role of men and women, it is so colored, of course, by, the much lower vibration here, the lack of understanding of the greater spiritual purpose of being human, of the destiny of the soul, of just reincarnation itself, which of course is understood in Hinduism and Buddhism and now in much of the West. But this idea of the one brief life that, you only live once, so, grab for all the gusto you can, as some commercial said. So that, that within the earth hollow, when you talk about the comparative harmony, much greater harmony that can exist between men and women, when first of all they have the long arc of a life of hundreds of years, and it's not, oh, I'm 58 and I haven't reached the pinnacle and gotten the corner office in the company, or I haven't, or, oh, my marriage is less satisfying, I'm gonna go off for some younger partner, and all this chaos, to say nothing of the the healing that has to go on, that must unfold as the patriarchy begins to hopefully disintegrate in not too violent a manner, and the restoration of the divine feminine, both within all men and women in their souls, and towards the healing of humanity and the earth begins to unfold. Well, then maybe we'll begin to approach this level of dharma in relationships as being the primary guiding principle. And, in my own life, certainly that's been, the great desire. I mean, I spent a lot of years in a monastic environment, but not a monk. And so it's, like a lot of people who try to find the middle path of a life dedicated to service to the divine and humanity, but not, on a monastic level of trying, and yet I want a beloved in my life. I want to have that reflection of the Divine Mother present, within an 11-11 balance of masculine and feminine, all the beautiful ideals that are there to inspire us. And so, when I hear these descriptions of dharmic relationships in the inner earth, of it simply being taken for granted. Perhaps not taken for granted isn't the best phrase, but to say that it is understood as being the purpose of life.
The natural course of action, yes.
Yeah. And that, for the careful governance around children, because there are fewer men, because, as you describe, the 3 heart poles in women and the 1 heart pole in men, and the dynamics of the inner earth are such, and maybe it's a property of the electromagnetism there, maybe you could go into that creates a situation where there are just fewer men born there.
Well,
And
they're
so,
conceived, yes, conceived. That being born is not a problem. They don't have problems birthing.
right, it's understood. We're talking about conception here, of
Yeah, yeah.
course, the difficulty of conceiving
Mhm.
as many men as as many male children as are, customary on the upper surface, where it's, more of a balance. Um, so let's see, I was about to ask you to address the, the understanding that, for example, when it's appropriate for a woman who may have found in the inner earth a lifelong partner to whom she is committed in a sacred relationship, and yet in consultation with Gaia, maybe that's something you can go into, because you said it's not just between the man and the woman to decide, yes, it's time, and I have my beloved, and yet I will enter into a sacred, respectful conception relationship with this man.
Mhm.
You described it as being that the third entity in the process of this choice is Gaia herself. Can you go into that a little more?
Well, as I understand it, and again, I always say this because it's so true, I don't have all the pictures of anything that I'm giving here. But as I understand what I do think I understand, it is that Gaia, as an intelligent being, responds to your statement, your request, your question, whatever. It's like you go to her and you say, Gaia, um, I'm feeling in my being, because I'm so connected to you, that it is time to have a child. If that is the case, then open the, I'm sorry, there's a little chipmunk on the porch. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. If that is the case, then open the door for this conception. It's pretty simple, you'd think, but if we tried it, it probably wouldn't work. I shouldn't say that. Of course, the same natural law applies, but we're just not,
Well, we can ask Gaia for help with the
of
right
course,
partner, the right child, the right woman.
we can. Of course we can. But I just was funning there. But I mean, we haven't gotten the knack of it really well yet. But they go into a deep, 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 deep heart resonance with Gaia. They know how to do that. That's the point. You got to know how to do that. You can't just say, well, it's getting toward midnight and Harry's coming over. I want a kid out of this. Okay. Gaia, come on, deliver.
Just give us some kind of signal of assent so that we feel really holy about this whole thing.
Right. I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm being silly. I shouldn't be. But
Well,
anyway.
that's all right. Let me just mention that, for example, in the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship, which of course has been, the lineage that I have been part of for many years, the spiritual community, that he teaches in the SRF lessons specifically how to, first of all, draw into your life, through sacred intention and prayer for guidance, the appropriate spiritual partner,
Mhm.
right? And then, if a child is desired, how specific spiritual methods of prayer and techniques um, to pray for the arrival of a beautifully aligned child who is coming into your family for the purpose of greater spiritual evolution, and hopefully for as harmonic a relationship with the mother and father as possible. There's a passage in the Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna asks Lord Krishna, so if a man tries in yoga to attain God knowing and he fails and he dies, what becomes of such a soul? Does he wander like a cloud and is lost? And Lord Krishna says, no, not ever is such a soul lost. This one who tried and failed in yoga is reborn into the house of the good and the great, and his good karma from his years of meditation carries him on. And then Krishna says he may even be born into a house of yogis where the light of yoga shines. But to be born into such a family is a rare event in this world. So that's this world, right?
Yeah. Well, what you're
Sounds
saying
like
here,
in Seraphim, it's more of the way things are done. Would that be right?
yes, it's the way things are done, but also, um, and I said this before in other shows, but I want to reiterate it. Their whole environment and atmosphere physically is so different from ours in many ways. I mean, they breathe air. It's a stronger mixture of oxygen and hydrogen. If you were plopped down in there tomorrow, you'd probably get really dizzy and feel weird for a while. You could probably make it through, and they have ways to help you, But it's just, it's oxygen, but it's just a richer format of it. There's other things that are different too, and enough so that they have the environment that helps them. See, we're in a lost environment here. And the thing that is important to understand is Thoth speaks about the tilt of the axis. And I don't know, maybe the axis tilted a lot of times, I don't know. But the one he's talking about was way in the beginning, and the first one that started the whole thing. And when that tilt occurred through lack of conscious connection to the lotus stem and the lotus reality, when we started coming down here, the axis was tilted. I'm simplifying it. There's more to it than that. But anyway, it tilted. And when that axis tilted, you see, the whole construction of the way the inner earth, just like a baby in the womb, was tilted. So they have some problems with that themselves that causes them to have to do certain things to keep, things stable in the inner earth. They do it and it's fine. But on the surface, we really messed it up. We really messed it up because when we got that axis tilted, all kinds of, the planet is hooked into our brains. The brains are hooked into the planet. And our cerebral location, which Thoth calls the critical rotational position, and that's a scientific term used for plants. The little plant, follows the sun, the flower or whatever, and that's the critical rotational position of the plant. But Thoth uses it, and they apply it in the inner earth as the critical rotation of the brain on the brainstem. And even in the inner earth, they make adjustments for that. People come in, if they're whatever, and they have a adjusting scan that adjusts that frequency, because everybody's not perfectly healthy all the time. Compared to us, they are, but they have, things that are going on because of the magnetic difference. So, but they have remedies, and there's no, you don't have to pay for it. You just go in and you have a critical rotational position adjustment, Well, we don't have that up here, and we're far worse off anyway on the surface. And so everybody's walking around with this brainstem problem that's causing, I won't say all the health problems, but hugely, it's letting things in. Because if you had that alignment, you hardly ever get sick with anything, and your mind would be clear, and you'd be able to focus on the true reality. So I don't know how I got off on that. You probably asked me a question about 6 light years ago.
No, it's fine. I think this came from exploring, just how very different the realities are.
Yes, yes, that's what I was going to conclude here just for a second. And that means that they're giving, Thoth says, give yourself some slack here. It's not like we all are just these horrible people, they're souls, and, all clustered together on the surface where everybody in the inner earth is so good and pure. We have problems, yes, we created, but, it causes generations and generations of reincarnated beings to have that problem because we are so disassociated with the whole alignment of the planet. And they live in an inner earth environment where the central sun is just right there. Gaia's heart's just beating right on their faces, in their hearts. And we're up here and we're in a disassociated place and we're trying to access her. And, it's just all kind of, difficult.
Right.
So we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. But at the same time, there are other factors. And I haven't even made videos on them because I don't really know how to go into these subjects very well without giving fodder to people for wild things, that are untrue. but I will touch on it and just say that certain souls that have incarnated on this planet have done so because the door was wide open, and they didn't come from the more evolved states of soul experience. They came from a very dissociated reality, and they just came on in because we had the door open, because we misaligned things. That's how the Anunnaki got in, you see. But there are other souls that have incarnated among us, and that's not finger pointing like, oh, you don't agree with me, so you're one of those bad souls. Of course not. I think if we stop and think about it, and we see people like Hitler and we can say, safely speaking, that those are the kinds of souls we're talking about, not somebody down the street that you disapprove of or you think is, not aware enough. It has to be something really extreme, but we have those extreme souls incarnating on this planet, and they aren't incarnating in the inner earth. They can't get in there, but they are, we've let them in. So that's another part of the problem that we have. How do we solve all these problems? The only way we can do it is to realign our spinal systems, and that by that I mean of the planet and the surface, realigning it all so it's in alignment with the central sun, which would mean the pole would have to tilt back to do that, and that's a bit of a little inconvenience. but
Yeah, that could put a crimp in your day.
But it's going to happen, and it can happen in increments. So anyway, that's part of it, but it's not going to be realigned unless we help to realign it through our heart-centered consciousness. However, I have to make another statement about Quantum Logic Interactive program that I'm, spearheading, or Thoth is spearheading through me. And because we're working with broadcasting streaming portals, pathways, let's call it pathways, where then the ultra beings, our kindred in the inner earth, our kindred can move through those pathways and start aligning. They keep calling it the aligning the spine. And so that's one way. I mean, it's, it's not foolproof. It's something they are doing, and it has, obviously, they feel it's worthwhile. And if they feel it's worthwhile, so do we on this end of it. So we're doing that. Every little bit counts.
Right. So when we look at the big picture, the big arc of this story, that you were prompted to share this now, because when I look at, from the beginning of our channel here, Blue Star Rising, there have been a series of sharings of this high sacred science and from the Thothic Akasha that sometimes seems to be sequential, certainly seems to feel guided, that it's important. You'll say to me, Michael, I feel this particular subject, it's important for timing. This has to come out now for whatever reason it might be. So as we're talking about tilt of the earth, okay, it's got to be corrected. Hopefully it can be incremental. In other words, not, a sudden shift, which would be huge earth changes, tsunamis, earthquakes, chaos. And the long-term ascension timeline, as we consider that rising heart frequency of enough people where a critical turning point is reached, the pyramidus radius matrix lights up across the planet, and it's the trigger for the gradual emergence or separation of the new earth. And you were describing how there is the numis om, which in a previous program you described as being that initial interim phase in the ascension process after pyramidus radius matrix and light principle 40 are underway, and there is this, Gaia is shedding her old skin and moving into a new world system, as it's described. Could you explore a little bit more just about how the reality of Seraphim as it currently is in place? You described it as being, or the Thoth had described it as being a new earth city, that it is perhaps an exemplar or just, you know, a seed in some way of what is to come in World System 2, in the New Earth Star. And so the question arises for me, okay, all right, so how does that then, how does the reality of Seraphim and like the island of the Dakini and all of this inner earth hollow, not so much the cavern cities at the top, the inner earth hollow, the sacred realm, how does that get translated into the new earth reality? Does it? And what will, you know, what will become of Seraphim and these cultures and this way of being as Pyramidus Radius Matrix and Life Principle 40 and World System 2 unfold?
That's a mouthful, yeah. Um, okay, let's touch on some of the points. First of all, the purpose of Seraphim is not simply to try to reflect an inner earth city. It is to connect to the inner earth and feed certain light quantum through from the, connect to the inner earth, I'm sorry, to connect to the new earth and to feed certain light quantum through from the new earth into Seraphim and thus broadcast it through the planet. One of the ways they're broadcasting it through the planet is through the quantum logic, which is not the only way, but yes, that's to give an example. So they have literally a portal into the inner earth. I mean, into the new earth. I'm sorry, my language, into the new earth. So, you know, those giant towers, talking about those 3 towers, that's what they use to do this. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know the whole mechanics of it. Like I said, I just don't ask some questions because I don't have time for the answers. But, you know, this is the way they do it. So they're literally connecting to the future of this new earth, and they're bringing that through these towers, and they're translating this energy and helping the planet, all of the planet, to receive some of this modality, to connect it, to help it, you know, X marks the spot. Here we go. Get the feel of it. This is the energy. So that's one thing. Now, another thing to realize, and I just recently realized this because I asked the right question. And I don't remember if I put this on the video or not. Short memory, but I can't remember. But did I say, Michael, in the video that about how Seraphim was literally created almost overnight there? Did I talk about that? Oops, you turn off.
I'm not recalling that you did say
Okay.
that. I remember talking about that with you. I'm just not recalling whether it was part of your program.
No, but it bears repeating. So I'll just repeat it. They didn't, you know, just, first of all, they have, you know, the intuitive circuitry, Tesla-phoresis, which creates things really fast. However, with this particular city, it's only been there since sometime in our timeline, in Europe sometime. Like, I'm not exactly sure when. Oh yes, around the time, you're gonna like this, of Francis Bacon.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, all of those people. Somewhere in that time frame, this was created. Not that long ago. How was it created? They didn't get in there and start doing like they usually do to build a city. Even it doesn't take that long. It takes some time. No, they literally created a matrix, a plan, all in holographic imagery. And then they put it there. Now it's a hologram, a holograph. However, it doesn't stay that way. They have a way, and I don't know how they do this, to turn a holograph into a real physical structure, a real physical thing. And I was prodding them on this with another video I just made today, or finished today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it because I'm going to put it in the links for people to see. And in this video, they were talking about the oracle spheres, they call them. They're kind of like the go-tos, combination of cell phone and everything else we can imagine in a little sphere. It's much more than that. But anyway, and it's a sphere they're carrying around. Saying, you carrying this thing around with you all the time? And he said, no, no, no. There's a little dot in the wrist. It's a little microchip, sort of like little dot. And it's in there. And then when you think it, it comes out into a sphere, and then you can operate it. And I said, oh, so the sphere is not physical, it's hologram. No, no, no. It's a hologram when it comes out, but then it becomes physical until it goes away again. And then it becomes a hologram, and it goes back in your wrist.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Isn't it, though? So it's the same principle of this giant city of Seraphim. Now, I'm sure that once the main thing was set down and made real, other little buildings and things, because there's a greater Seraphim with other little areas, and were added maybe in a more normal way, normal for the inner earth. But the main core, that's the way it was placed. So we got that in our minds. So now, what happens when everything goes, excuse me, into the new earth? With light principle 40. Certainly the inner earth beings are going to experience that. And I would venture to guess that all of their sacred land areas are going to be encoded and moved into. But I don't know that they're going to, I don't know that it's going to have exactly the same form. Now, Seraphim, it really doesn't matter if it disappears or not, because it was a holographic city that was created to be physical for purpose. Kind of like Never Never Land. Here it is. This is helping the lost boys, whatever. It's like, this is for a purpose. And when the pyramid, the whole pyramid of Giza thing, that it's not going at all. It's like a booster rocket, So there are areas that aren't necessary, So, but the beings are, the beings that live there, and the encoded energies of certain parts or the whole of the inner earth is going. But it's, when we go to this Eurostar, I'm not even sure how the world exists in those world systems, if they have a hollow. I think they do, but it's far more, it's completely aligned with the surface of their planets. And I don't even want to say planets, I want to say worlds, because they're operating within their stars, for one thing. So they're not circling anything. There's a lot of things about this. Like I said, I don't know. It's hard to visualize how a world is inside. I understand it's not going to be hot because it's, the same vibration. I got that part. But it's hard to understand how this world, where are they nested? How are they arranged? I don't know at this point. But the important thing to know, I feel, is not that so much right now, is just that everything that is in the inner earth and the outer earth that is of light is going to be encoded and brought through. And some of it's going to be recreated more or less the same for a while, and some of it isn't. So,
Right,
but
and that connects to the planetary genius of Gaia.
Yeah.
Right?
And I was saying to him a long time, I was saying, look, I'm getting older. I don't want to take this body with me. I don't want to wind up 72 years old. That would be a bummer, And he said, no, you take the encoding with you. You can put it into any shape and any form and any. Oh, I thought, ooh, okay.
Right. Yeah, we've got that Akashic counselor over in the corner of the room with the long red hair. Maia,
Oh, yeah.
Maia, circa 1972 or so.
That's my other life.
Right, there you are.
Yeah.
And that was about the time when that's how this fellow first experienced you, right? So.
Yeah, but not that he was
that's
ready.
how Christine Hayes looked when she met Mr. Presley.
Yeah, right. That was about the right time.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, that big picture certainly helps, and I always try to go there if I can, to the big picture story, and then to bring it back to, okay, here we are. It's July 20th, 2021, with everything going on in the world. And for all of those who join us for Blue Star Rising, these are fascinating journeys we go on. And the question remains, all right, how do I integrate this? Is there a way to integrate this? Certainly hearing about the life in Seraphim, in the, the sacred inner earth hollow, of the higher vibrational relationships between men and women, of the dharmic understanding that is simply the way life is lived, of their ability to bask in the energies and consciousness of Gaia herself as the central sun. It's, we wake up to a sunrise, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe there's clouds, and they live in the constant, pulsing presence of the central sun atoma, which is the heart of Gaia. So to tune into that, what I come back to is, we always bring it up that the heart activation is the beginning and end of all of this, and that there's some mysterious purpose served by the sharing of this story, of all these stories. We're just one part, as you say, of, what you are doing, and all the growing group that is working with the Quantum Cube Logica project in pulsing out the vibrations and energies of the rebalancing energies from Seraphim out into the whole planet to help facilitate this. That's a huge role, and yet we know we're just one among many on the planet who are doing these kinds of work. But I would just encourage all of us to, we're all on our unique paths, working out our karma with our unique destinies and our heart's desires for love and service. I think most of the folks who bother to tune into us are in some way or another what I would call sacred activists, to use Andrew Harvey's wonderful phrase, that we take joy in service to the good of all and the healing of Gaia, while expressing our unique gifts as sovereign beings. So this particular story, I think, is helpful for us to just allow ourselves to imagine what it would be like to wake up one morning in Seraphim, to feel the glow of Gaia's own heart rays, the rays of her heart, of the central sun atoma, being what feeds our existence and guides our lives. That there is, it's not a question of, am I going to be able to pay the rent, and the health insurance is chaos, and the politics are so distracting, and oh my God, what's going to happen to the world? But if we can begin to live in that tuning in and asking for divine guidance on a daily basis of, okay, guide me. What can I do today to radiate more love, compassion to those around me, to live in this higher vibration, which, as you say, it's being pulsed out from the heart of Gaia through many means, the Quantum Cube Logica among them, the mile-high towers there that are generating this pulse out to the whole planet. I just thought I would dwell on that for a bit, about the higher dynamic of how we step by step, can tune in to the divine plan with our little, human desires, and elevate and transmute them if we can.
Yes. When we started this video somewhere along the line, I wasn't trying to receive it, but you said something that triggered something. It's like if I hear something at a certain right time, the Thothic stream matches it. It says, "Oh, here's the match," and it's about how the inner earth souls in the hollow, and all of the hollow, why they were brought in there as the sacred ark, to save their genetics, their not only their genetic, well, their spiritual being that's so connected to their genetic field that it was when they came in the first place. So of course the generations that have come after them in the sacred hollow have that as well. It's their genetics is so connected to their spiritual being. You cannot separate it. You certainly can't separate ours. Not that it isn't still natural to be that way, but we have, well, the earth tilt, but there's other things too that have disassociated ourselves from that. And then we've poisoned our genetics so. Which brings us to another thing, and I'm going to be very careful with my words here, but there's something out there right now that is messing with our genetics big time. And anyone who enters that, whether they're being forced to, or they'll lose their jobs, or they're just unaware and they think it's going to be for their better benefit. This is a major plan that's been in the works for a long time. And now the U-Guard is taking it over, but it's the same plan, just been, has a sort of a different twist to it. And so, our genetics now, this is the big push to change those genetics so completely that they have us. And that means Light Principle 40 is going to be either a long way off or much fewer beings are going to be on board. Not because they made the choice they made, but because of the tampering of the genetic field in general, which this particular thing is adding to extremely. Now, what's the light in this? The light is that who has the genetics that are our genetics only before all of this stuff happened, way before. The beings in the inner earth. This is their moment. And there is going to be a way, and is probably already starting, for those genetic patternings to be broadcast to us to help mitigate. And I'm not saying cure everything. It doesn't happen that way, but to greatly help mitigate the tampering with the genetic field. And one of these things was what Thoth brought up recently. He calls it an app, an application that's connected to the stream that's going through the quantum cubes of the quantum interactive. And this application specifically has been designed to create a pathway for the genetics of the inner earth beings to flow through that pathway to help to mitigate, to help to bring back to stabilization our genetics here, and to actually neutralize some of the effects of the thing that's going on right now. There's no completely happy ending on this level of consciousness to all of this, but it's certainly going to make a big difference, or it certainly has the potential to make a big difference. And I'm sure they're doing other things, but that's what I know about. And I didn't see the connection, though, until just now between the genetics that are nice and ready for us in the inner earth, just sitting there like, here's our arc companions. They're there with all this perfect genetics, and here we are up here going nuts. And then I knew about the app, but I just didn't make the connection until now I thought, well, what are they going to do with it? Okay, it's working with the DNA. How's that work? And all of a sudden it was like, oh, it brings in the genetic coding from the inner earth beings into the surface earth. This is golden. I mean, I almost feel like crying right now because it's just such a beautiful thing. It's a moment that's been waiting to happen.
Yes, it's an anxiety for many of us who are aware of the implications of what's going on for human genetics, and to know that there does exist this original, unpolluted, untampered with stream of our true original genetics, complete with our full potential for divine unfoldment, right? That's, I mean, that's the best news I've heard in a long time, because, I follow the growing evidence of what the genetic consequences are, what appears to be the irrevocable consequences genetically are of what's going on. And yet nothing's irrevocable in the end. And at the same time, as you say, it's about mitigation and about being able to turn the corner, about essentially the victory of the light over the attempt to basically thwart the new earth, thwart light principle 40, thwart the ascension. And the light is winning and will win. So that's, our overarching message, with like our little, tagline for Blue Star Rising, Templar Awakening, is applied sacred science for the global crisis. And I would say for the ascension timeline for Gaia's ascension into the new earth, and all of us with her, God willing.
Yes, God willing. And he does. He does will it. God only wills good for us. And I say God, the universal principle, this great source, the divine beingness in us all. You can call it anything you want, but it does not align with negativity, only beauty and positivity in the heart.
Exactly. Well, with that, thank you everyone for being with us. Tune into Maia's Quantum Cube Logica. She's got wonderful sessions, Akashic sessions that can be offered. You'll see links down below. If you're able to send us a donation at the Sacred Academy to help all the work we're doing, there's a link there too. Anything else you wanted to add, Maia?
Yes, you noticed. There is one more thing. And I did mention it briefly, but I just finished a video. It's about 25 minutes on the title of it is The Nirvana Crystals and the Inner Earth. And it really falls in line with a lot of what I've already been presenting. I just feel it's of importance, so I'm going to put a link to I put two videos together in the link because, and they're in one collection, so you just get one link, because the first video that you need to watch or rewatch perhaps in order to really get what's going on in the Nirvana Crystal video is the one that we did a show on, but it's just the insert video, so it's very short, on the sapphire throne, ice canopy and the sapphire throne or sapphire pillar. And that, because the Nirvana crystals key off of the sapphire pillar. So I put those two videos together, and I will put them, a link for that in there. So.
Right, so everyone can peruse that if you're so inclined. So again, thanks for being with us on Blue Star Rising, and God bless us, everyone. We'll see you all on our next sharing. Bye for now.